Uh, Today we're honored to be in the presence of some words that are bandied about greatly in our society, mainly legend and icon. Those are two words that are thrown about greatly in our society. They always say, well, this person's a great legend or a great icon. We actually have one with us today, and his name is Parnell Jones. Parnell Jones is special for a variety of reasons, and he's been known as a race car driver. He's been known as someone that was an innovator. He's been known as a person that could do things that no one else could do. He's raced in virtually every type of venue under the sun. He came from more or less meager beginnings, but we don't know that. We're going to find that out today in our interview with America's legendary race car driver, innovator, and American hero, in our opinion, on the cutting edge, and that's with Parnell Jones right here in Torrance, California. Now, Parnell, a couple things that we need to know. You were born in Texarkana, Arkansas.
That's correct, yeah.
When did your family move to California?
I was about a year and a half, almost two, I guess, when they moved to, actually they went to Hemet, California, and then shortly after that to Fallbrook. And I was raised in Fallbrook until I was about 7 years old, in which time my dad worked in the avocado groves. And about that time my parents moved to Torrance, and then I was raised in Torrance, California. I really and still have my office here in Torrance, and I do live in Palos Verdes, but other than that, that's basically where
so you're a hometown kid right here from Torrance, California.
Yeah.
You're a real icon for Torrance. I mean, yeah. They got to name some buildings after you or something soon.
Well, you know, the chief of police used to say his claim to fame was to catch me all the time.
That's incredible. One of the things I'm gonna move on to this, because one of the things is that and California is a kind of a special place, and you came out here when you were 2, you by 7, so you're talking about 1940. About you moved to Torrance, is that right?
Yeah.
And in those days they had Carroll Speedway, I called it. They had Gilmore Stadium. They had all these places where they were racing midgets, weren't they?
Yeah, Gilmore, they raced midgets. They run mostly stock cars and sprint cars and roadsters, track roadsters at Carroll Speedway.
One of the things that they had was a big controversy back in the midget days, was they had the Offenhausers versus the V8 60s,
yeah,
which were 1932 Ford small block engines. That they raced in those days. Now, when did you start getting interested in all these kind of car racing things?
You mentioned Carroll Speedway, because when I was a kid, I went out there and didn't have any money, so obviously I climbed over the fence and watched the first race there, and it was some sprint cars and track roadsters, and track roadsters were T model type, and
27, anyway, 23 Ts.
Yeah, and Troy Ruttman was driving one, and he was a big burly guy, and he stuck way out of the car, and he started in the back, and he came all the way up and wound up winning the race. And that somehow made a great impression on me. I didn't think at that particular time I was going to be a race driver or anything like that. But anyway, it made a great impression on me, and so later when I did get involved in racing and stuff like that, I wanted to, I mean, he was my hero. Yeah, I wanted to be like him.
Yeah.
And one thing about racing, we didn't have driving schools and go-karts and things like that. It was kind of like going out and doing your racing was kind of like watching somebody dance and trying to go out and do the same thing they did.
One of the questions that, you've done a lot of these interviews, and one of them was about, was it your brother or cousin who got you involved in the process?
Yeah, actually my cousin, what happened was when I turned 16, I had a horse before this, and when I sold my horse when I was 16, and I bought a hot rod, and I paid $200 for the hot rod.
What was it?
It was a T Roadster, much like the ones that was running on the track, but it was street legal, somewhat. And anyway, I had to work in a garage in the afternoon after school to keep it running.
Sure.
And so because I was working in the garage, my cousin had took his wife's old car and made a jalopy out of it. Wanted to help him. Thought I had to help him because I had a little mechanical knowledge, because I was absolutely hanging on washing parts in the garage.
Right.
Anyway, I did, and he used to let me warm it up, and that was
That's
big.
that's one of the things that they haven't really touched on when we talk about this, and there was a lot of great drivers, really great drivers that came out of the jalopy racing circuit, and was that where you got your start?
Oh, no question. So, in doing that, my cousin, first of all, he didn't do very well with the car, and he blew the engine up. So my buddy and I, we went over, and I was only 17 years old, but we bought it from him and got a junkyard engine and put in there, and we were going to take turns driving it. However, he never wound up getting in it. I didn't do very well either, and ran a few races, and at the time, only being 17, you had to be 21, so I had to have a phony identification. And my buddy, who was helping me, used to kid me about a girl in school. Her name was Nellie. And so he called me Parnell after this gal. Because my first name is Rufus. And so anyway, it stuck, and that's basically, because otherwise the kids in school would have known I wasn't 21 being in my backyard.
Yeah. One of the things that everybody has in common when they get into this automotive industry is connections with people that help them along the way.
Yeah.
One of them that seems to be a big mover in your history was J.C. Agajanian. Could you tell the people who J.C. Agajanian was and how he helped you?
Well, J.C. obviously was probably the promoter at Carroll Speedway when Troy Ruttman was running, but J.C. was a promoter of automobile racing. He also wanted to be a driver in his early day, but his dad threatened him more or less, and the only way he would help him is to, help him support a race car or stuff, but as long as he didn't drive it. But anyway, he became a major race car promoter all over the western part of the United States.
Now, is it true that he was actually a pig farmer and a trash hauler?
Well, his dad was.
Oh, I see.
His dad came over here from the old country.
Armenia, yeah.
Yeah, and he was working as a dishwasher, and he noticed that they were throwing out this garbage out the back, so he bought a couple of pigs to feed and took the garbage and everything and grew that into a major pig farm, and also bought a lot of real estate way out in the valley, in Montclair area way out there. So.
Well, there's little doubt that J.C. Agajanian had an incredible impact on Southern California and on the car culture, because there were races at Gilmore Stadium, there were races at Carroll Speedway, there was constant competitive things going on. Now, how'd you get your first race?
What do you mean? Well,
I mean, after you're doing jalopies, I understand that.
Well, I have to credit the jalopies for a lot. I mean, a lot of. First of all, when I went into other kinds of racing, they kind of give me a little down thinking about me or whatever, but because of the jalopies. But I want to tell you, we had as many as 200 cars show up to qualify. Right. They only took like 16 for the main event. Now,
so you had to be really good
every weekend, but we had a tremendous amount of cars.
Well, there's little doubt that you've never been known as a non-competitor. Well, you've always been a big competitor.
It was kind of like roller derby. You push, shove, took everything you could take, and give it 110, 120%.
Right.
I mean,
right.
It was that sort of deal. Well, when I went into other kinds of racing, sprint cars and midgets, and got promoted on that, I didn't have that kind of competition. It hurt me in a lot of ways. It taught me how to go fast and maximize everything I could out of a car. What it did for me is it's kind of bred like a quarter horse and not a thoroughbred.
Yeah.
And I knew how to go fast. I didn't know how to win.
Oh, funny.
So I had a lot of races that I fell out that I should have won.
One of the movies, there was a movie in 1949 that came out, was called The Big Wheel. Do you remember this with Mickey Rooney and Thomas Mitchell? Yeah. And it was a lot about Carroll Speedway and about Indy and all of that kind of stuff. Did you know about this?
Oh yeah, that was a little bit before my time. But,
right.
But I knew all about that. So watched it. Saw
right.
the movie.
So how did you when you went to race these guys from the Midwest on these sprint tracks and so on? I mean, there was a tremendous amount of competition between. You're a West Coast guy now.
Yeah.
You're not from Texas, you're from West Coast, California guy, against these guys from the Midwest who are pretty darn competitive, aren't they?
No question. Well, one thing about it, California, most of the manufacturers for automobile race cars were done out here in California, and also, we could race all year long because of the weather. So, it made it more popular, I guess, at the early stages. And anyway, you know, that when I first went back east, and you know, and my friend Jim Hurtubise went back the year before, and he talked me into coming back there in 1959, and I went back and ran in all these horse tracks and fair grounds and things, and dust and dirty. I mean, I almost quit because it was so dusty and dirty, and I couldn't, you know, and I thought, man, if I have to race in this kind of stuff for the rest of my life, I'm not going to live very long. But
it's,
anyway,
it's the old story where you got the fertilizer on your goggles.
Well, when we'd get to a racetrack where I could see I could win, and I ran very well. I ran third in my first race back there, and won the second one, and won a few more.
Explain to people, because they don't really know I don't think many people really understand the difference between why sprint cars are a transition to Indy cars.
Yeah, sprint cars, actually, midgets were really kind of designed for a quarter-mile track.
Right, small
and
ones.
The sprint cars were kind of designed for a half-mile track.
Okay.
And Indy cars were designed for mile tracks and larger.
Right.
Now, they sometimes interchange them, you know,
right.
on tracks, you know. I mean, obviously not going to take an Indy car and run it on a quarter-mile track.
Right.
But you could run it on a half-mile, and you could run a midget even all the way up on a mile track.
Right.
You know, but anyway, when in 1960, I was talked to going back and running USAC, which I went back and won the Midwest Sprint Car Championship and won some races, and quite a few races. And then the following 2 years, 70 or 60, 61 and 62, I won a national sprint car championship.
Now
that was probably the most dangerous part of my racing career, because we were running these high bank racetracks.
Oh yeah.
And a half mile, 5/8 miles, and one of them deals where you had to hold your breath for as long as you could. And
one of the things that I was going to ask you, though, I have to step in on this one because it's really important. How did you make money in those days? I mean, there were sponsors, but how did you earn a living?
Well, they paid a lot of money, as far as I'm concerned. When
Did they?
Run up front, you've got, you know, you've made some good money.
Really?
You know, first of all, I set goals for myself. Even when I was running jalopies,
yeah.
I set goals, and I was living at home and saving about $50 a week. You know, so I always felt if I could make $1,000, I'd collect the interest on it, and I, you know, probably wouldn't have to work anymore. Then I finally, won my first $10,000.
Wow.
You know, and I thought.
What year was this? What was?
Well, that was probably in late '50s. And
wow, that's a lot of money in those days, huh?
Yeah, '60. And so, and then when I started running sprint cars back east in Indiana, and also went to Indy cars as well, and so I thought, man, I'd just make $100,000. I would never have to work again, you know. But
now, these sponsors, were these the car owners and developers, or
I started driving for everybody else? Because when I was running jalopies, you know, and winning a lot of the races, well,
sure,
I was invited into different types of racing, and I won right away, you know.
Right.
So I just, you know, people started saying, "Boy, you're Indy material," you know.
Yeah.
I thought, well, you know, and I waited a couple years before I went to Indy to make sure that I had a good ride when I got there, and I did ride. You know, in my rookie year, I was rookie of the year and led the race for 27 laps at Indy, and could have won if my car hadn't lost a cylinder.
All right.